All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for coming to our webinar and navigating that late notice link shift. We're very glad to have you all here. Um, there is there are a lot of ways to approach interviews. And so there's no one right way because each of you are different, right? And that's to be celebrated. Each of you are coming from different backgrounds. Each of you have different traits and skills, different ways that your personality come through. So for each of you to be successful at interviews, that flavor is going to be a little bit different for each. But what they all have in common, all successful applicants are able to show some of who they are, right, in these interviews. And so, regardless of how you approach it, one of the main skills you'll need is to figure out how do I break down this wall of nerves so that I can let my personality shine through. And giving authentic answers that are true to yourself and your values are really what we're after here. So, as you listen to what Janelle has to say, I want each of you to reflect on what does that mean for me? How do I show this for myself? How do I um, show who I am, what I want to be, who I want to be, right? How do I reflect that? So we're very excited tonight to have Janelle Villiers as our speaker. So Janelle is my co-owner of GC Prep. She also, until very recently, was the assistant program director at Sarah Lawrence, where she was in charge of admissions. So when I say she knows what she's talking about, like she knows what she is talking about. Okay. Years and years and years of seeing multiple papers, multiple applicants. She knows what is successful and she knows who the admissions teams are most excited about. Okay. So,
Muted.
ooh, am I muted? Oh, that's from the other one. Sorry here. Um, so we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll turn it over to Janelle.
All right. Well, welcome everyone again. I'm glad to have you all here. I'm excited to go through this information with you. What Michaela said is 100% right. Please take this to use this information and make it your own. Today we'll be going over demystifying interview goals, how to prepare for the big day, practice for common interview questions, and additional support. So first, as we are thinking about what are programs looking for, I think this is like the big question. Everyone's like, well, what are they looking for? Because I want to give them what they want. Um, passion for genetics, academically intelligent, empathic, teachable, brave, mix that with courageous, and insightful. Insightful, I thought about actually underlining or bolding or like highlighting. That's probably the biggest thing. They want all of this with a double dose of insight, and we're going to get into that as well. So, how to prepare is where you guys are all are, and I think the best thing to start off with is if you've just been invited, again, congratulations. This is a big deal. For those of you that are going to be getting your invitations, I think it's important to recognize when you feel your best. When do you feel like your highest energy level, your concentration, your focus is all at the best at. For some people, that's specific times of the day. And so when you're choosing your interview, if you do have the ability to choose certain times of the day, and not just the day of the week, please take that into consideration. If you can at all, try to figure out as much information as possible. How long is the interview? Because you definitely want to budget your energy during the time that you're there and the attention that you're going to be giving. And one of the best things that you can do is find out who you will be interviewing with. Sometimes you'll be interviewing with one person. Sometimes you'll be interviewing with multiple people in a group. Sometimes you'll be interviewing with multiple people, but each individually. So you want to make sure that you understand how the process goes, and if at all possible, to do research on the folks that you will be interviewing. This is important, one, because it increases your confidence, lowers some of your anxiety because you have an idea as to who you're going to be talking to. But I also want to really emphasize to do a double dose of research on the institution that you're interviewing in and of itself. The programs really love to hear about what you know about the program, what you are already familiar with. I can tell you that oftentimes when an interviewee shows up and they ask a question that could have been on the website, for example, that doesn't necessarily bode over very well. So things that are easily accessible, and I don't mean the things that you need to like dig through, but things like um, who the program directors are, the different types of rotations that may be available. A lot of programs put that information on their website. So just do as much as you can. It's just going to make you feel more confident and comfortable during the interview itself. And if you can really figure out what sets that particular program apart, what makes them unique compared to other programs, and not necessarily what's better, just what's unique, what makes them a little bit different from another program, and then just focus on that when you're interviewing at that particular program. All right. So, brainstorming the different experiences that you have had. This includes in your volunteer work, in your crisis experience, in your shadowing, even in your jobs, but identifying how you have processed your emotions during these really critical experiences, times where you've had challenges, times where you learned things, times where you've grown, and during the experience, again, whether it was volunteer work, crisis, shadowing, your job, working in a group setting in school, whatever that is, really being clear on how you processed your emotions, where you were in that situation, and in particular, how you learned, how you grew, how you improved. I love that growth was, for some of you had that as your word for the year, right? Your intention. Um, and if you can become really clear on that, you may want to write it down. I'm a jotter. Like I love the journal that I have, and sometimes just jotting down the emotions that I wake up with, right? And let me just give you all permission. You have my permission personally, but your own permission to have more than one emotion at one time. It is to it is within the human experience to have more than one emotion at one time. And I think we don't pay attention to that enough. And if you sit down and take a couple of moments to just process that, that's going to help you a lot as you think about your experiences and how you dealt with them. In addition to those experiences, you definitely want to reflect on why graduate school is right for you. This is not like undergrad. Some of you on here may have already gone to grad school, so you can certainly back me up on this in the comment section if you want. Although I can't see the comments, but Michaela, I'm sure will back you up as well. It is different from undergrad, right? There's a lot less hand holding. You are expected to have a lot more internal motivation for wanting to do well, for wanting to learn what you're about to learn. Um, it's not just about the grade, it's about actually learning the information and being able to apply it. And so why is that good for you right now? Where are you in your life and mindset that you feel like this is the right time for you and you're ready for this new challenge? And so I think it's really important to take the time to reconnect to those reasons as you think about this, because it is like if it's not said explicitly during your interview process, it's definitely like the undercurrent question that your interviewers are having. One, is this person ready to come into a genetic counseling training program? But also the like right underneath that is like, are they ready for graduate school? Are they mature enough? Have they thought about why this is right for them? So thinking about why this is the right time, why you're prepared for graduate school is important as well. Okay, so there are different areas where we provide some help as well in terms of before and how you're prepping for interviews. That includes some educational videos that we have, as well as mock interviews that we can also provide, as well as coaching. We're going to go through a lot of those details near the end, but I just wanted to add that as that's something else that you can do to prepare before the interview. So let's talk about the day of, right? So now you've figured out when you perform your best. You scheduled the interview during that time of the day on that particular day of the week. And now it's the day. Definitely think about how can I show up as my best self, like me, all the way me. And so that's a lot of that has to do with centering. Meditating is great. For those of you that are like, I can't meditate to save my life, do breathing exercises. If you've never heard of the of a box breathing exercise, one of them that's really great is breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 5, and then breathing out for a count of 7. And then doing that as many times as you need. There have been several studies that prove that particular breathing, box breathing pattern actually calms the nerves. So please use that. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and nobody will know you're doing it while you sit in your chair. Um, Other things that people do, I love the idea of like right before the interview, like find your favorite song, dance, right? So it just kind of like gets you happy, excited. I know there are some people that I've recently met who are artists and they love to draw, for example. If that's like something that really excites you, you get really passionate about, go ahead and draw something right before your interview, help you get your jitters out. Whatever it is that really helps you just you're at peace with yourself. You're in your like your greatest joy of just being you. Do that. That's what we highly recommend that you do that the day of. And for sure, again, there are lots of studies that prove this. Everything is virtual now. We totally understand that. And many times, a lot of us are, party or professional on top, party on the bottom. Don't do that. A lot of studies prove that if you actually show up in full attire, including your bottoms, that you will actually, it actually helps with your mentality too, the way you focus, the way you show up, the way you are during the interview. So obviously, we can't force you to do these things, but they're simple, they're free. You might as well take them into consideration because if any little thing can help you be more at ease, then that is going to be, or be your best self, then that's going to certainly help you in the long run. Nobody wants you to sound too rehearsed. And I've now talked to several, not just my admissions committee, but now several program directors who have said that they have come across applicants who have actually read notes and they can tell it's like on the side of your screen. Sometimes people look down, sometimes people look on the side of their screen because they put like sticky notes or something. You can do that, but I'm just going to tell you we can tell. We can tell and we don't like it. We're trying to figure out why do you need notes to figure out something like why do you need notes to remember certain experiences or like it begins to sound canned, rehearsed, and that is not who we're trying to get to know. We're trying to get to know you as a person, not as a prepped and primed you, because that's not who you're going to be when you show up in grad school. You're going to be like your normal self, struggling some days, other days really good. So show up as you, not as this person trying to like I know it comes from nerves. I get it, which is why I mentioned all those other things to try and help you with your nerves. Go back to the box breathing. But I'm just telling you, it does not look good. We can all tell when you do it, and it just does not look good when you go off to the side and just like read those notes. Take a moment. If you are like, oh man, I forgot what I was gonna say, take a moment. It's okay. Breathe. Tell the interviewer, it's on the tip of my tongue. There was this thing and it just like left my mind for a moment. It's okay. And then come back to it. And you may not even remember in that moment. It's like, it's okay. If it comes back to me later, I'll get back to it. That is all of that is okay. You are allowed to say that. And that type of reaction is much more welcome than you going to the side of your computer screen to check your notes. Okay.
And Janelle, can I
While
just
you're
hop
there,
in?
some level of self-awareness is important. I've just been talking about comfort level this basically the entire time. Um, but also some things that you are going to feel, not necessarily will there be words to describe what are there listed there, but in terms of the vibe that you're getting with the interviewer, you can tell, right? Sometimes, again, even over a Zoom meeting, you can tell that it feels a little awkward, a little stiff, something's not right. You can check all of that. So I would say if you notice it again, calibrate, take a couple of breaths, like refocus. It's okay. Everything's okay. Let's just think about what they asked and try to give them the best answer that I possibly can. Um, are there things that you can learn from the interviewer? Are you fascinated by some of the things that they're saying? You now are engaging in a like real flow of conversation and actually learning from them. Is that cool? Is that something that interests you? Is that something that excites you? Because then you maybe want to think, this is a part of like the culture of this program, perhaps, and maybe this is something that I really want to be a part of, and they get higher on your rank order list. That's for later. But just, keep an eye on those things. Certainly, if you experience any microaggressions or any insensitivities that you feel that you're receiving from any interviewers, you want to make note of those too. You don't need to gaslight yourself, certainly. If you felt it, you felt it. You may want to take some notes for yourself if you want to just like jot it down and tell the interviewer, I'm just going to take some notes. Um, as I'm listening to you, I'm also learning, take some notes and just write down something that you felt, that is totally okay. It's the reading from pre-prepared notes that's the problem. But you taking notes is fine. And then I think also when you're talking, if you get the chance to talk to any current students, just again, it's a vibe check. Are they happy? Are they okay? These are things that you should pay attention to. And it's just kind of like an awareness. You may not even get to speak to any of these things, but I think it's important the day of that you acknowledge them as you go through your interview.
And Janelle, just real quick, I'm gonna
Mm.
hop in there. Um, Absolutely. Remember, like the people who you're talking to that are interviewing you are going to end up being your instructors, your teachers, right? So if you're getting any type of like microaggressions from them, are you going to be comfortable being in that space with them for 2 years? Do you want to pick up their genetic counseling style as your own? Right? Those are like, it goes beyond just like what is happening today in this room because when we're all in school, we're kind of learning how to do genetic counseling by imitating what we see our instructors and our supervisors do until we find our own style, which usually happens at some point in the first couple of years of your career, right? So the people that are interviewing you, are talking to you, could you approach them with a question? Would you feel comfortable like bringing a problem to them? Do you want to match their vibe? And if it's just one person on an interview day, okay, fine, right? Maybe you don't have to spend a lot of time with that one person. But if it's multiple people, then that could be like a culture of that space that would not be good for you, right? So it's just important to pay attention to that. Um, Also, on the topic of like, don't read from your notes, right? That's why it's so important to just spend time thinking about your experience. Like each experience, break it down as far as like, what did I think? What was I feeling? And spend time with those concepts rather than like bullet points. The facts of what happened meh, don't really matter. What you thought, what you felt, how you processed it, that was important. And so spending time reviewing what went on inside your head and what moved you forward is far more important than writing specific notes about it. Just being comfortable, you can have that experience in your back pocket and apply it to relevant questions when they come up. Sorry, go ahead, Janelle.
No, it's okay. Um, yes, to everything Michaela said. And I'm gonna take a deep dive into my formula for insight in a little bit, to go through some of that. One other thing, as you were talking, Michaela, it reminded me of one other thing, and that don't sound too rehearsed, don't read from notes. I want really quickly, I want to also acknowledge that during an interview, looking at the person in your screen on your computer, it's right. So when we were in person, we used to do this eye contact thing, and that was really important. So how do you have eye contact over Zoom? It's still a thing. So you looking at the person that you are having the interview with is still really important. And also, I'm fresh with all of these studies, but there was an expert that I recently saw an interview with who's a body language expert who emphasized that when you talk to someone, staring at them is one thing, right? It means that you're listening to them as they talk. But when you talk back in return, it is the body picks up on if you just stare at them the entire time. What they actually expect is that you look off to the left and you look off to the right as you're talking because the other person, their body reads that as someone who's thinking about what they're going to say and is being very considerate of their words and is being very intentional. Whereas if you just went like this the whole time and you never looked away and you just kept talking, 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 it actually feels unnatural to the listener. And I thought that was so interesting, and I just wanted to share that. So if you've ever received feedback that your eye contact is poor or something like that, definitely look at the screen when you're talking, but also don't overdo it. Like don't swing the pendulum to the other side that you never look away, because then actually reads inversely and not consciously. This is why I bring this up. This is not a conscious thing that the listener does. It's just human. It's just human nature for us to immediately wonder what's going on, why the person never looks to the right or left. Or at least what I say is the likability factor goes up when they see you go to the left or the right. They feel like, oh, this person is really engaged and really wants to talk to me. So just something to consider. I thought it was really cool learning that. Ooh, went too far. One of the things that I get asked is whether I should talk about other programs that I'm considering while I'm at my interview. And the answer to that is yes. Please go ahead and share that information. All of the programs know that most applicants have applied to many programs and are interviewing at the very least with one other program. It is a smaller amount of people who only get one interview at one program. The vast majority of people who have interviews do have interviews at more than one program. We all know this. And so it actually behooves you to let us know. It's um it's kind of like, oh, okay, this person is considering other options, and I don't know, it just makes you seem more real instead of like holding that close to your vest, because it's kind of like, well, we already kind of know, why are they holding on to that? Conversely, if you really are in like if you are interviewing at other programs, but this is like your favorite program based on what you've read so far, based on the connections that you've made, it's okay to say that as well too. Like I am interviewing at other programs, but this actually is my like favorite program. It's totally okay to say that. They want to know that too, because if they really are vibing with you, they're like, oh, okay, good, and they vibe with us. So like it's all good to say that and just be as open as you want. If you feel like this is not your favorite program, but you do want to let on the fact that yes, I am applying to other programs, this is like a little thing that you can kind of keep in your back pocket to say like, yes, I'm also thinking about um University of blah 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 program. They do have a great program, but what makes yours particularly appealing is, and then insert whatever unique aspect of that program that you've already researched, right? So please don't feel uncomfortable if you get asked this. It's okay to say yes completely. I don't want people to think that they can't or it's like some big secret. Okay, so let's talk about some of the most common questions that we see. These are probably the most three that you'll see as an applicant. Tell me about yourself. Why do you want to be a genetic counselor? And tell me about a time when you were in conflict. What did you do? Or some version of that. So the tell me about yourself. They're not necessarily asking for your life story, and they certainly don't want you to repeat your CV. So you really want to focus on more recent experiences that you've had as it relates to experiences trying to prepare for training in genetic counseling, and focusing on the things that you're really passionate about in those experiences, the the qualities that you have that make up who you are, and some of the skills that you've honed. Those are would be really good to highlight and tell me a little bit about yourself. So beforehand, you should think about that. What are some skills and some qualities? Perhaps you've talked about this already in your personal statement. That's great. You can start there. That's your foundation where you maybe started talking about some of that there. These are just some things that you may have seen: hardworking, empathetic, open-minded, enthusiastic. Maybe you're proud of your culture, you have a passion for justice. All of those things are great things that you could share. And what I recommend is don't just list them and say like, oh, I'm hardworking. I really love the culture that I'm a part of, and I want to give back to my community. You can say those things, but then always back them up with the experience that you had doing those things. Oh, so I'm a very hardworking person. For example, when I was working three jobs, or when I was so excited about this job that I had that I actually stayed overtime to make sure that a certain project came out the way that you wanted it to, right? So don't just say the thing. You want to give some examples as to kind of prove what you're saying. So you want to think about that, brainstorm that before you go in. So if you do get asked this question, you can talk about it with ease. And And picking a target for your future, something that you'd be really interested in, is also really helpful. If you're like, oh, but I don't know what specialty, Janelle, I don't know if I really want to go into prenatal or cancer. Totally okay. You don't need to have that chosen right this moment. But maybe there's a particular aspect of genetic counseling or something that you've heard about in the rumblings of the profession of genetic counseling that is something that people are working on that you're really excited about or curious about or want to know more about, or anything like that also works. If maybe there's a particular special interest group that you're excited about being a part of, those types of things. If it's not the specialty itself, just imagine yourself in the profession and more than just practicing. Is there anything else about the profession that you're excited about or that you'd want to move closer to? That's what they're looking for in terms of like future goals and where you see yourself in the profession. Okay, so don't copy this. And thank you, Michaela, for providing this because I thought this was actually really good. Um, you can read it here. What's in red are qualities. What's in yellow are things that are important to you. And the green is specialty role, leadership, NSGC involvement, right? So it's basically a goal or somewhere where you see yourself in the future. So I've always been a pretty driven person academically, but I didn't really get excited about any course of study until I found genetics. While my initial background was in cytogenetics, I just felt something was missing. I felt like the science was too distant from the patient and I wanted to do more. When I found genetic counseling, I knew it was a profession that would keep my mind engaged while also allowing me to use my passion for advocacy and patient care. And that was confirmed for me in my shadowing experiences. At this point, I'm ready to apply my active listening skills and enthusiasm for social justice and medicine while in grad school, and I hope to land a prenatal job after graduation. This is like super succinct. You may go in a little bit more into one thing or the other as the conversation goes, but it captures all of the things, right? It's they're when they ask you, tell me about yourself, they're interested to know kind of like how you found out about genetics, genetic counseling, like what was kind of like your path in this direction, why you're excited about the field, what do you think you'll bring to the field, right? You have a passion for advocacy, you're engaged, you wanted to have more interaction with patients than what you were doing before. Um, the fact that you're driven, that you're excited, the fact that you have enthusiasm for the profession, all those things, those qualities are really great. And then again, if you having some sort of future goal or plan at the end would be really great too. This is great for the interviewer because as they're listening to you, they may identify with one of those things and like, oh, I can, in their mind, they may relate to something like, oh, I'd love to hear more about that. And then they'll ask you to expand on one aspect of your story. But think about your story as basically it is kind of like the time capsule as to how you got into or why you decided that you wanted to get into genetic counseling. They're not asking about yourself like from birth. It's not like that kind of a question. So this is the kind of like the foundation. Go ahead and take your phones and take a screenshot of this if that's helpful. We are going to post the recording on the website so you can take a look there too. But this is essentially the foundation if you want to kind of like wrap your mouth around the words and like how you would go about saying things. I highly recommend you practice, even if it's not like with a genetic counselor, practice with somebody, a friend, your dog, somebody. Just getting sometimes what you think you're gonna say in your head, and then when you try to say it out of your mouth, and you're like, ooh, oh, that felt different. So this is why I recommend you practice before you actually have the day of. It'll be really, really helpful to do that. So this is just a framework. Okay, the next question. Why do you want to be a genetic counselor? Please don't say I love genetics and I want to help people. It was so funny. When I first got into the position at Sarah Lawrence and I was in charge of admissions, I remember my colleague said this to me. She was like, oh, when they say like, I love genetics and I want to help people, like so many people say that. And it's like, duh. And I looked at her and I was like, people really say that? And she's like, yes, they do. And I like did not believe her. I was like, I think she's making this up. And then lo and behold, the applications came in and the amount of personal statements where this was in the personal statement. We are assuming that you love genetics and that you want to help people or love to help people. That is the assumption. So telling us this doesn't really tell us anything. So you can go beyond that. The way that you show that you understand and value genetic counseling, really comes from insight. So these are just some examples. You could totally use any of these examples because they line up with insight. I'm going to really dig into insight in a moment. Um, you could give an example of, a loved one who had a bad experience in medicine. You don't have to go into details about, what exactly they had, but just in generalities. And that a lot of that could have been avoided if they'd had a genetic counselor, or you're passionate about people being able to make autonomous decisions and want to help facilitate that. You're from an underrepresented group and want to do your part to help others from your group have the same access to genetic services as the majority does. There are lots of different reasons why people want to become a genetic counselor. Each of you has your own already. You're already thinking in your head like, "Oh yeah, this is why I want to become a genetic counselor." And I'm going to tell you what what they're looking for. What everybody's looking for at this point is insight. This is like your ding 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 ding. Here's the part where you can really show your insight as to what genetic counseling is. And after the 7 years of doing this, I think it was in year 5, I finally figured out the formula so that way you can understand what insight is. So please, if you're not already taking notes, write this down. This is literally the formula. When you know the what, the how, and the why behind what a genetic counselor is doing, you will have insight oozing out of you, even if you didn't want to. It's just going to come out organically. So what does that look like and sound like? If you have spent any time with a genetic counselor, whether that is in person in the same room while they're doing their sessions, or if it's virtually, you're virtually watching them do sessions, or if it's an interview, you're having a virtual interview with them, or maybe you're sitting down having coffee with a genetic counselor. However that scenario unfolds, you're going to number one want to find out the what. So I'm going to give you an example as if you're having an interview with a genetic counselor. So I know shadowing is the gold standard, but what if you're not able to do that? What if you were only able to do interviews? I'll use that as the example. So, genetic counselor, what did you do today? Or what did you see today? There's the what. Well, Janelle, I saw a patient today. I assessed whether they met the requirements for genetic testing. Um, Turns out they did. I answered their questions, made them feel better about some of their anxiety, and I facilitated the genetic testing. That's the what. Not too bad, right? I'm going to tell you right now, so many of you stop right there and you're like, oh my God, it was amazing. The science was so cool and they made the patient feel better. And then that's it. That's like all you've got. And you think that that's like the best thing ever. Meanwhile, on the other side of it, the interviewer is like, oh no, they really have no clue. That doesn't really show insight at all. It's very, very superficial in terms of your knowledge and your understanding and the insight. So you need to go further. You need to plus the how. So the how sounds like, well, how did they do what they did, right? Well, it turns out, again, they saw a patient, they assessed whether the patient met the requirements for genetic testing. Um, and during that part of the session, they were empathic during some parts of the session. Other parts of the session, they were more educational. Um, they used language that was I wouldn't have thought to use certain language that they used to explain certain things. They could have done, the patient did meet the requirements, and so they facilitated the genetic testing, and they could have done buccal swab or doing drawing blood. They decided to do a buccal swab, and there were two different labs they could have sent to, lab A or lab B, and they decided to send to lab B. And now you're like, oh, okay, so this is getting more interesting now. Now we have the how they did what they did, right? Now, here's where all of the magic exists. It's in the why. Why is the genetic counselor doing any of the things that they're doing? Why? Why did they decide to be empathic during some parts of the session and more educational in other parts of the session? Why did they decide to use a particular word to describe a concept? I never would have thought to use that word. Why did they decide to use that word? Why did they decide to use a buccal swab and not draw blood? Oh, well, it turns out the patient's been getting their blood drawn all over the place. And they were like, you know what? The sensitivity is the same whether you do a buccal swab or a blood draw. So let's go ahead and do a buccal swab. Why did they send to lab B and not to lab A? Well, it turns out the hospital has a contract with lab B, and so everything gets sent to lab B. Or maybe it's a patient's insurance and it's cheaper to send to lab B than to lab A. Like, why? Why are they doing any of the things that they're doing? If you start to find out why a genetic counselor is doing what they're doing, the insight starts to become so much clearer. And you'll be able to talk about genetic counseling in a way that has so much more depth and understanding. And so anytime that you're with a genetic counselor, please, if you can, get the why. Now, I understand that when you're doing gold standard shadowing, it's amazing because you see the what and even sometimes the how in real time. You see it literally unfolds in front of you, which is great. But because the genetic counselor is in their place of work, they may not have time to answer the why. And so you might not get that on the fly or in the moment, right? With an interview, you don't get to see the what and the how in real time. But the genetic counselor isn't in their job. And so they have plenty of time to talk about their why. And let me tell you, genetic counselors love talking about why they do what they do. They love it. So you don't have to feel like you're bugging them or you're asking too much if you're just trying to get that sense as to why they're doing what they're doing. Please go ahead and ask. If you're listening to me and you're like, oh man, I'm not really sure why the genetic counselor did what they did for any of the things that you saw, feel free to go back and ask. If you feel like you do have some understanding of the why and you have more shadowing or more interviews coming up, please feel free to use that for those experiences and those interviews. You can't have too much insight, so it's not like you can like get too much. Right? Go ahead and continue to get that information. Once you have that information, why you want to be a genetic counselor should become so much clearer because you have insight as to why genetic counselors do what they do. Maybe you really enjoy not just making the patient feel better, but you enjoy being empathic and giving patients the space and the room to have the emotions that they're having, to really think through the process that they're going to make the decision that they need to make. Maybe you really enjoy um, um, I mean, for what it's worth, maybe you do enjoy like the science part of it, but it's the way that in which you can really break down some aspects of the science to make sure that they really understand. And that kind of word choice is something that you really love. Or maybe you really understand, like it's annoying having to deal with insurance and things like that, but you recognize that it just comes with it. And I understand I have to deal with it and it's annoying, but it's worth it. And maybe that's why when you do become a genetic counselor, you want to be a part of the movement that's really trying to get um the code passed so that way Medicaid and Medicare will like identify us and we can get better billing for ourselves, like all these things. Right? So once you have that information, this will be a lot easier for you to be able to answer with insight. This is where you get to really show that off by explaining the experiences and the understanding of the why genetic counselors do what they do. Okay, sorry, I know I went deep into that, but that I told you they're looking for a double portion of insight during your interview. Okay, so let's talk about the next question. Tell me about a time when you were in a conflict. This may also sound like a time when you were very uncomfortable. We're looking for success stories, but we're also looking for failure stories because when you fail is usually where you learn a lot. There's a lot of learning there, a lot of growth that happenings there. You definitely want to demonstrate insight and growth from these experiences. That's really what's key, what they're looking for. Remember when I told you grad school isn't the same as undergrad? It's actually hard. I'm just going to be really real with you. It's very hard. I don't, there's no sugarcoating this. I want to be very clear. You have to do a lot of things on your own, right? There's nobody hand holding you. So you got to figure out how to study for classes. You got to figure out how to do the projects that are all due. You have to figure out how to go to your clinical rotations because there's usually not someone hand holding you to get to the rotation site, right? You have to figure out how to navigate talking to all your different supervisors in your clinical rotation. You have to work on your thesis. Oh, and maybe you also are working part-time. Oh, and maybe you also need to now wash clothes because you've run out of underwear and now you need to like do laundry, right? Like all of this is happening at the same time. And you've got to navigate all of that. And don't even get us started in terms of the relationships that you're also trying to balance, right? Whether it's significant other, family, roommates, all of these things. So a lot of this is why this is really challenging. And so we would love to know how you've dealt with a challenge in your life where you've shown growth, where you've showed some learning, all of those things are really helpful. And that's why this question comes up so much. So again, thinking about your mental process, your emotional processing, the actions that you chose to take, and what happened because of those actions, the lessons that you took away from it. If you're sharing a failure, what could you have done differently now when you think about it, right? All of those things are really, really important. Um, I've had some people say like, oh, well, if I've gone through a challenge, do I need to like explain the challenge? And now no, this isn't like, oh, whatever. I don't know. This may be crass, but it's not like challenge porn. That's not like what this is. We don't need to know all of the details. It's more than just that we're trying to get a sense as to like what you learned from it and how you grew from it. So don't feel like you need to go into a lot of detail if you feel like it's emotionally painful to go back in time to a time where you had like a really difficult challenge. It's more the growth side. We're really trying to get more information on the other side of it. We love growth. Love growth. Okay. So what's interesting is that the formula for insight exists on this question too. We're looking for the what, the how, and the why. So insight will always be these three questions. And so when we're thinking about tell me about a time we had conflict or where you were uncomfortable, it was a challenging time. This is an example of what a basic response might be. And again, this is superficial. It's just the what. I saw a case with a child with delays, and the mom had a few other pregnancy losses. It was hard. It was a hard case because of the language barrier and needing an interpreter, but it was still super interesting. Great. Something a little bit better would include the how. So I saw a pediatric case that was challenging because of the language barrier. Even using an interpreter was going poorly because the patient spoke a dialect that they were less familiar with. I was feeling stressed out just watching, but the counselor remained calm and just communicated most basic ideas through the interpreter and got the patient to a decent level of understanding. But I also got to see how the genetic counselor works within the whole clinic team to discuss testing. So that was interesting. And when you include the why, as you guys all know, that's where the juice is. I sat in on a session that ended up being really stressful for me. It was a pediatric case, but there was an intense language barrier that the patient spoke a rare, and because the patient spoke a rare dialect that the interpreter wasn't super familiar with. Even though the counselor was calm, I was getting stressed about the communication issue, and I could see that the patient was extremely withdrawn. I was actually really worried if she was understanding the information in a meaningful way. I'm not sure exactly what I would have done since I'm not a genetic counselor yet, but I feel like the counselor was a little nonchalant about the whole situation. And that case has stuck with me because I just wonder if that was the best patient care, right? You can think of it as context, like that might be another word for it, but like really digging into why was this challenging for you? What were the parts that really felt icky or that really like made you uncomfortable? Why? Why? Why did it make right? So the insight formula works no matter which situation or question that you're thinking about. I think this will help you guys as you're navigating your own emotions and feelings as you think about the challenges that you've experienced, as you think about conflicts that you've had. Continue to use that formula to help you navigate as you journal, as you try to um, understand for yourself what your process was like. Okay, so here are just some other common questions. I'm looking at the time. We don't have many. Again, this will be on recorded. Take a screenshot if you want, but these are some questions that do come up significantly. This is one set of questions here, and then I have another. Go ahead. I'm gonna give you another 10 seconds to take your screenshots. And next. Okay. Here's a couple more. Hmm.
And with all of these questions and the answers that you're giving, they're not looking for perfection.
Mm-mm.
Perfection is a myth, right? It does not exist. And if you're a perfectionist, rehabilitate yourself. It's not a virtue, okay? I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying like AA for perfectionists, right? We need to start letting go of the idea that there's a perfect way of doing things because there's not. There
Mhm.
is not, okay? So with these questions, you will mess some up. That is okay, right?
Mhm.
With these questions, sometimes you will give answers that occasionally you are ashamed of how you behaved in that moment, like that you're
Mhm.
describing, but you're describing how I reflected on it. This is how I would do it different. I realized my mistakes. That is okay. Like that is showing that you are having an interaction with other humans, with yourself, that you're trying to do growth, right? That you're trying to improve. So interviewers especially, and I especially love when I can see a person being like, this is where I was at in point A, and now I'm at point B. And I can't change that I was at point A at some point, right? And I did things that I kind of regret and wish I hadn't done or wish I'd done differently. Now I know this, right? And so in the future, I plan to do it this way, okay? Because grad school and genetic counseling and life in general is all about growth. Who you are right now is not who you should be in a month, right? Who you are right now is not who you should be in 5 years. You can have the same values, right? You can have the same things that are important to you, but how you're executing that should grow with you. That is the point of life. So it is okay to acknowledge your failures as long as you can show your growth, what you learned from it. It is okay to validate your victories as long as you can say, this is what I've learned from it and how I would apply it in the future, right? All of that is within the human experience. And all of that is very authentic and shows you as a three-dimensional person to the person you're talking to.
Agreed. All right. Don't forget, you are also interviewing them. So some of those things that we talked about being aware of, we talked about insensitivities, microaggressions. Are the students happy? Are you learning from the interviewer? All of those things are helpful so you can try to navigate and figure out, do you like them? How high should you put them on your rank order list? That type of a thing. So please don't forget that you're interviewing them. Also, this is the twofer. It's you are interviewing them, so keep any of these questions in your back pocket. Um, but also the interviewers are expecting you to ask a question. So please, I know sometimes you're like, oh, but they answered all my questions. Uh, th all any of these, all of these are good ones if you feel, oh man, they really answered all my questions. You can use any of these. My favorite back pocket one that I can't really be answered unless you ask it outright is tell me something that you really love about the program and or their genetic counseling experience so far as being a genetic counselor. Most people aren't going to answer that for you unless you ask that. That's like your get out of jail free card. The one question you can ask if you have nothing else that you can think of that you want to ask the interviewer. But these are really good ones too. All right, really quickly, I wanted to talk about personal emergencies because I've had, in my years of experience, I have actually had all of these. So something, me personally, I mean, like I've had an interviewee tell me that they had one of these emergencies, but, and so if they happen, we totally get it. So this is an unexpected event. It could happen shortly before the interview. Unfortunately, we've had several interviewees have a parent pass away or a grandparent pass away like right before the interview. We've had someone get into a car accident right before, a home break-in, right? Like these things happen, not frequently, but they happen enough that I actually remember them. Um, and so it is important to tell them about the recent unexpected event because this may put you in a place where you don't really feel like yourself. And it could kind of take you out of your game and out of your sort. So it's really great to let the interviewer know that, you're kind of off and that this is why. It's certainly not an excuse, but it does allow for an exchange of empathy. It does allow for, I get it, you're being vulnerable, and I know that's really scary, but it does help to create connection in that way. Remember, you're being interviewed mainly, sometimes by geneticists, but mainly by genetic counselors. And so most genetic counselors will hear that and they'll respond in an empathic way, not in a judgmental way. So it doesn't help for you to pretend like everything's okay when it's absolutely not. Please don't use this when it's not like an emergency, essentially. So like if there's a series of annoying events, you dropped your coffee, then you tripped, then you got like a bad grade, right? No, this is really for the really serious things. Okay, and now we want to transition to how we at GC Prep can help to support you more during your preparation process. And I'm going to pass the baton to Michaela.
Thank you. Before I start on that, I just was halfway responding to a question in the chat that I just want to answer verbally because I'm going to be talking, so I can't type it. So the question was, what should we do if we're asked something that we're unsure of an answer for? Which is something that everybody has to know because you could prepare every second of every day until your interviews, and you will still not be prepared for every possible question that they could ask you, right? That's just the reality of it. Um, so there's a couple of things to do. First, again, spend a lot of time with your experiences, and they think beyond the medical field, not just genetic counseling experiences. Because at its root, genetic counseling is interpersonal relationships. That's what sets it apart from being a doctor, right? The ability to connect with another person, to develop rapport, to get to this onto the same page, to reach an understanding, to understand how they are thinking, how they are making decisions, what is important to them. The interpersonal relationship is the most important part of genetic counseling. Okay. So all of the experiences in your life that you can pull from, again, they don't have to be related to genetic counseling at all. I want you to think about when, was there a time when I really vibed with a person, when I was in conflict with a person, when I felt lost or alone and had no people, or felt like I had no people? When did I feel a lot of community? So you want to consider all the things that have happened in your life that were meaningful to you. Why were they meaningful to you? And the more time you're willing to spend with a wide range of those experiences, the more you're going to have in your back pocket to whip out when you get a question that you're like, I did not prepare for that one, but let me just review this like catalog of experiences I have in my mind and this catalog of, and maybe this is my brain doing something weird, but sometimes I categorize my experiences by like the main feeling that I was having right then, right? So if I'm thinking about the things that have happened in my life, if they're asking me like name a time when you were in conflict, then I want to go to the kind of the bucket in my mind of the time when I was super uncomfortable and in conflict, right? And kind of see what came up, what memory comes up when I'm in that like emotional space. Your brain doesn't have to work that way, but I'm just describing what's going on in mine, right? Um, and so the more time you spend kind of like reviewing all these aspects of your life, the more you will have prepared. As far as answering something that you really don't know, like where to go with it, Janelle, do you have any particular advice on that? Like if you really have no answer for
Yeah,
that
at
question.
the end of the day, you can just say, I don't know. Um, I've had this probably comes up the most with situational questions. So I've had people on my admissions committee, two people in particular, who love to give, okay, so let's say you're seeing a patient who has sickle cell disease and you now have to explain inheritance. How would you go about explaining that? And you're like, well, I don't know. Right? I've seen people crash and burn because the response was just kind of made up. They were just kind of making things up just to like fill the space. And I don't want to speak for the interviewer in particular, but I think if that person just would have said, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I know we're going to get trained on this, but I know I'd want to think about what I understand about the inheritance of this particular condition. I'd want to know as much as I could about the gene and try to explain that the best that I could. And that would be okay. But saying like I don't know is better than making things up. I think that's where most of the applicants I would say got the most freaked out. Like, oh my God, what if they ask me this really hard science technical question and I don't know how to answer it? It's better to say I don't know and just think about conceptually what are the things that you would want to get across, even if you don't know like the hardcore science itself. It's just conceptually things that you think that you would want to convey. Um, Alternatively, an easier question, a more open-ended question where I've gotten, I don't know, is tell me a time that you took a risk. And some applicants were like, I
That's a
don't
common
know.
question.
It is a
Prepare for
common
that one.
question. It's the
Yeah.
same as the tell me a time you've been conflict challenge. It's a time when you've been pushed, right? Beyond your comfort zone, essentially. Um, So yeah, but I have gotten I don't knows from that one. And I will say, an I don't know is like, okay, I guess you don't know. And it is a bit of a letdown. So if you can prepare a little bit for that, but I mean, again, it's okay to say I don't know because genetic counselors have that happen during sessions where a patient asks them something and they're like, you know what, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out and I'll get back to you. And so if you need a moment to think about it, you might start off with, I don't know. Let me think about that. And it's totally okay to think and take a breath. You don't need to answer rapid fire. That's not what they're looking for. So I'm trying to think of other questions. Those are the ones that are top of mind right
Those are
now
the big
where
ones.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
mean,
has come up.
um, if again, if you're stuck, saying something like, I don't know, can I get some clarification on it? Are you asking like this thing or this thing, right?
Mm,
And
mm, mm.
that can help you kind of get unstuck or kind of direct your thoughts a little bit. But again, there's no way for you to approach all possible questions or be prepared for all possible questions. So another like mental tool that I would have in your toolbox is knowing I'm going to mess it up at some point. Like that is the theme of my life. I'm going to
Mm.
mess every activity up at some point, right? And so I just have to know, okay, this is that moment. Let's let it go, right? So even if that particular question is disappointing, that is not the only question you will be asked with that particular interviewer. That one person is not the only person you're going to be talking to at that school. So it's not like you have to have every single question that every single person answers or asks you perfect to be accepted there, right? So they're looking at overall themes, right? So you're going to have multiple people giving impressions about you for each interview day, right? And so if you took an L for that one particular question, just take that loss and move on, right? We're going to compartmentalize that into other things, and we're going to try not to let it influence our anxiety for the next question. Okay. Okay. Great. I know we are at time. So if anyone needs to hop off, no judgment. This is all being recorded, but we do have lots of fun things to talk about. So do whatever you need to do. And I just wanted to address, there were some questions here. Um, about like group interviews or like panels versus a mini series of like one-on-one interviews. Yes. Okay. So at some schools, everyone will have read all of your documents, right? And so they're all going to be asking things about all of your documents. Okay. At some schools, one interviewer is asking about your documents, and one interviewer is asking more like behavioral type questions, and one person is asking more about like your goals and stuff. So they might divide it up into themes for themselves. They're not going to tell you what that theme is necessarily. So again, there's no way to like anticipate that. But just know that not every person that's asking you questions will have read all of your documents. They will have been read by the school, right? You are going to get graded essentially, or they are going to have thoughts about your paper, your CV, things like that. But the person right in front of you may or may not have read your paper specifically. They may or may not remember all the pieces of your paper. Okay. And so when it comes down to group interviews, panel interviews, um, just remember that you're not being graded against the other or like evaluated against the other people that are there that day. Even if you're in a group interview and there's three other applicants there, you are not being assessed in conflict with them. It's not like one of the three of you will match and the other two are out of luck, right? All three of you could match. That's totally fine. So personally, I think group interviews, one of the reasons why they do those is they want to see who can play nice in the pool, right? Who's going to be a nice kid in the sandbox, right? So you don't necessarily have to agree with what other people are saying. They might pitch a question and then ask various opinions on it. Feel free to disagree with what someone else says. That's okay. Just be respectful when you're doing it, right? Um, it's okay to um, build on someone else's answer, essentially. Okay. And even if it's not like a group interview, all the other people that are interviewing that day, all of you could match, right? Because most schools have like 3 or 4 interview days. And if they need 15 people, it's not like they're gonna like, okay, we have to take 4 from this day and 4 from this day and 4 from this day and 4 from this day. No, it's like of all the people that they interview, they're gonna fill their seats, regardless of what day you interviewed on. So you're never in direct conflict with another applicant. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. The mini, like, bam, 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 you got 20 minutes to talk and you've got like 8 of them or like 6 of them back to back. Know that mental fatigue will be there, right? It's hard to greet that many people right in a row, okay? Um, so just anticipate that. Figuring starting that whole process already feeling like yourself is the best way to approach that because it's really hard to start awkward and get comfortable in 20 minutes a bunch of times back to back, right? Um, and again, let's say you've got 6 of those, there might be a dud or two in there. Because let's face it, some genetic counselors are super easy to talk to and develop rapport easily with other people and put people at ease. And some genetic counselors are just kind of crotchety because they've been around for a long time, right? Or for whatever reason, they might be kind of burned out. So do your best to be you. And if the other person isn't giving you very much back, it's not you, right? It's probably not you. And just move forward the best that you can. And as long as if you feel like you vibed with at least one person on interview day, in my mind, you have succeeded because that person you vibed with is going to advocate for you when they all meet
100%.
later and are
Hmm.
like, okay, well, let's talk about Michaela. What are people's thoughts? One person you vibed with was going to be like, oh my gosh, Michaela, we had this great conversation. It was like this. I really felt this from her. And I think she would be a great fit for our program. And someone else might be like, you know what? We didn't really work out, but I'm great. I'm glad that like you guys did. So vibing with at least one person is a great way to know like, oh, that interview day went well. Okay. If you didn't
True story. True
Yeah.
story.
If you didn't feel like you vibed with any particular person, but it went fine overall, that's still okay. But like in my mind, knowing that you vibed with one person is like the slam dunk. Okay.
Just
Um,
just so you know, I have seen that happen multiple times. The interviewee interviewed with multiple people, but like got along really well with one person, and that person advocated for them like throughout. So yes.
yes. Okay, cool. Let's move on. All right. So, can GC Prep help you? Yes, we can. Does it work? Absolutely, it does. Right? Or else we wouldn't be here. So, if we look at last year, 77% of those people who had mock interviews or similar with GC Prep ended up matching. And that was compared to about 50%. That's the national average, right? So in the past, it's been about 50% of people who applied get interviews and approximately 50% of those who end up matching. Last year it was a little bit skewed. We had about almost 60% of people who applied got interviews, like nationally. This is not GC Prep, but just nationally. And then about 33% total of people who applied matched. People who use GC Prep in a meaningful way, significantly higher match rate, like 68% of everyone who used GC Prep ended up matching. So compare that to the national 33% average. So do our methods work? Yes, they do. Can we help you? Yes, we can. Obviously, we can't guarantee that you'll match, right? No one can do that. If anyone's promising you that, then they're lying, right? There's a lot that goes into it, but can we improve your odds and get you much better prepared for your interview days? Absolutely. Here's how we can do it. So, the educational videos, these are great to get you like 65, 70% of where you need to be on your own. They're great budget friendly options, especially if you're someone in like um, a racial minority, someone in the LGBTQIA plus community, or someone in a lower socioeconomic demographic. The videos are available for free. Okay, so that under the financial aid tab, there's a demographic survey. You can take that and get free access. Okay. The videos are also available for like individual purchase if you want that, or there's like a pretty low cost, like monthly subscription that you can cancel when you're done, right? So low cost, low energy option there. Okay. Mock interviews, that is a one-on-one session. You send us your documents, like your essay and your CV, and we will generate questions specifically for you and general ones, and then have a 45-minute mock interview. And it kind of varies by coach how they like to do that. But with me, for example, I'll ask some questions, you'll answer, and then we'll kind of like break it down question by question. And my style is I'm kind of going to needle you into getting deeper down into that insight, right? And once we've done that a few times, people usually get to the point where they understand, okay, what is the level of insight that you're looking for? And then they get the pattern and they're able to apply that to future questions, right? So single mock interviews, like a one-time thing, are great for those who are feeling really prepared on their own and they just want to spot check. Okay. We have that with just kind of our regular coaches. And then we also have like a premium option with our either which with Janelle, because she was a assistant program director. And we also have Janice, who's the actual program director at Baypath. So that's like premium with them. Okay. We also have a package, right, of mock interviews. So multiple of them. And I would say that that is where the rubber really meets the road for most people. So 3 mock interviews is probably our most popular service at this time of the year. Um, it gets you growth, right? Especially if you stay with the same coach. You're learning what they're trying to teach you, you're applying it in the next session, and it gets better and better each time. And you develop a degree of comfort with the types of questions that you're going to be asked. And this is where we saw actually statistically, numbers wise, matching percentage wise, the most improvement for these individuals. So if you're considering a mock interview, um, you can book like a free orientation session on our website. That's like 15 minutes with me. We talk about what you're after, your learning goals, right? And we talk about what kind of coach you want to have, and we can make recommendations. All our coaches' bios are now up on the website as well if you want to learn about that. Um, in the next few days, I'm going to be changing a couple of things like billing, and you'll be able to book a package like multiple mock interviews directly on the website. Right now, they like tonight they can't be booked multiple sessions at once with that discount, but that's going to change in the next couple of days. Okay. We also will have realistic interview simulations coming up. They have not been scheduled yet, but it's basically like 3 applicants will rotate between 3 different interviewers in like half an hour sessions. So you get the whole like interview day feel. And you have to like start up that conversation 3 different times in a row, essentially. Okay. So those are great for people kind of towards the middle to end of your preparation when you've done a lot of that thinking and now you just want to like really practice applying your skills in a true mock interview, like simulation setting. Okay. Um, we also have long-term mentorship. So this is for people who want that mock interviewing help, but they could also benefit from like some life skills coaching, right? So we have a couple of our coaches who have life coaching certifications as well and can provide really holistic coaching and growth. And so people interested in that, again, there's also a free orientation for that where we can talk about your goals, especially if you're not sure kind of what interested in or what would be best for you of all of these options. Okay. Next now, if you don't mind. Cool. For people who want something a little bit more like intense and focused, a little bit more um, metered, I guess. We have two options, interview prep boot camp and interview prep crash course. So boot camp is like an immersive 3-week course of up to 4 applicants and the coach. There are topics for discussion on each of those weeks. You get to practice, you meet twice a week, one time for discussion and like group collaboration, and then the other time is actually practicing the interview. So 2 people would be interviewed each week by the rest of the group. So you get practice developing questions that you think would be interesting, as well as practice answering them. And there's a one-on-one mock interview that goes along with that, as well as all of our educational videos and more. Okay. So that's 3 weeks, twice a week. And those are coming up. One started today, but we can still take people. And another one starts in February 3rd. We also have like the crash course, which is the same content, but just jammed into 2 days. So like 2 3-hour blocks, one on Saturday, one on Sunday in a weekend. Same kind of discussion with those topics. And each person who does it gets a one-on-one mock interview that they schedule with the coach. There's just not time to actually practice the mock interviews with the group. Okay, so a little bit different. The pricing is different on those, far more details on the website, but these two options are really great for people who are kind of considering the more holistic type coaching. They really want like topics to focus on and something that's very guided, right? These are great places to start. Okay. If you have any questions, if you're not sure, yeah, and all the prices are on the website, as someone just asked. So if you're not sure where to start, you're not sure what's best for you, book a free orientation session with me. There is absolutely no obligation. We just talk about who you are and what you want and how to get you there, essentially. And if the answer at the end of that is, I don't want anything to do with GC prep, go with my blessing, right? So we're just trying to figure out what is the best thing for you to be as successful as possible. And that's going to look a little different for every person. Okay. All right, Janelle, do we have any other slides? I think that's kind of mostly the end. Okay. Oh yeah, here's us, right? So Janelle and myself, we are the co-owners of GC Prep. Jessica and Jessa are our coaches that are also life coach certified. Okay. Janice is the program director at BayPath. So if you applied to BayPath, she can't coach you, right? That would be a conflict of interest. So that's the only restriction there. And then we have Anna and Nira as well, who are coaches. So all of these people are wonderful. You really can't make a bad choice. But if you're not sure who to go to, again, you can find their bios on our website under like the book coaching. There's kind of a drop down there. And certainly we can talk about them and what would be a best fit for you in a free orientation session. Okay. Okie dokie. I am happy to take questions. So I'm going to be looking here. Cuties. I'm going to be looking here at the chat. And then also if anyone wants to say anything through their mic, that's fine too. Would I be able to provide the website link? Absolutely. So here is gcpreplc.com. Cool. There's our website. You can go to, there's a lot to explore. The educational videos tab, you can see all that in there. There's like the book coaching services, and there's a drop down. There's the program map. There's explore. There's lots of stuff to find on the website. Okay. And lady, looks like you had your hand up. Do you have a question?
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for doing this. You guys are awesome. I have like tons of questions, but of course that would be like a whole separate webinar on its own. But I just really wanted to like talk about what you were just talking about, like the coaching, like for everyone to know, like I did coaching for my personal statement, and I think it was like the best thing I did. Like it's been my first time applying, and I'm still waiting for like interviews or whatever. But like Michaela does this thing where it's like in the orientation that she was talking about, she uses like her weird powers where she will like literally match you to like a really good coach, which at least was my case. And even if that is not the case for you, like it's okay. Like you can always like, I'm sure everyone's awesome, but like my experience has been really great. And like just to you kind of like a quick example, like one of the schools that I applied to, they had like this really weird five per essay that really killed me. And one of the questions was like something about like a conflict, a difficult situation, and whatnot. And I had like something in mind, and I went to my coach and I was like, I'm really having like a hard time with this because it was like very personal and very like I wasn't sure what was too much to share because I didn't want to like overshare. It's not like anything crazy happened, but it was like very personal. And she kind of like I ended up writing about something else completely because we had like this whole conversation, but the point is that like they're really good at what they do, and like they're really good at like getting you at a place where you need to be both in terms of like being comfortable about like what you want to share, but also like for you to like not overshare. If you're like me, I share. I'm an open book, so it's like just wanted to like say that and thank you.
Well, thank you. That was not a paid advertisement, but that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Um, I don't think it can be overstated the value of having someone who is 100% on your team, right? Having a cheerleader, having a coach that believes in you, having someone who knows what they're doing when you ask them a question, because there can be people in your life that are 100% on your team. But if they're not genetic counselors, then like there's a limit to how much good advice they can provide, right? Because they're just not in the world. And so the confidence that is built when you know that the person who is there to help you believes in you, has good advice to give you, help brings out what we see below the surface and knows kind of we can see the genetic counseling traits and skills because we're in that world, we live it. And so we can point to the things in your life and your personality where it's like that right there is a genetic counseling skill. I want to see more about that. And it can give you more direction. Um, and when you have more direction, you are also building that confidence going into your interviews. And that can't be overstated, just how important having that confidence is. Um, and just knowing that you're not alone in all of this. Okay. I also want to make a quick comment about right now, the like prospective student, like Discord or wherever, subreddit, or wherever you guys are meeting right now. At this time of year, it gets frenzied, right? It gets highly, highly, highly anxiety laden. Um, and I would say that there is a limit to how helpful being in that environment can be, right? So I'm not telling you like avoid it like the plague, but I'm letting you know that spending a lot of time reading highly anxious comments that have been answered by other applicants who may or may not know the answer may not be helpful. Okay. Also, just because an interview invite wave went out from one school does not mean that they won't send out another one. Right. So I'm sure there's like a tracking document on there who sent out what to who, and people think that they're not going to get any invites because that school already sent out a wave. Like, not necessarily the case. Okay. So consume that community with caution at this time of the year. Okay. And if it's starting to feel like someplace that's just raising your anxiety instead of being helpful, pay attention to that and don't go there again. Does that make sense? And we need to protect ourselves emotionally. Yep. All right. And then there was a question here I want to get to that said, like, Would it be appropriate to discuss being a reapplicant when answering a question on like conflict or adversity? Yes, um, it would be. You can definitely do that. Um, Not matching sucks, like really bad. Like it feels terrible. The word I most commonly hear from applicants is devastated. So don't just stop there though. Again, to Janelle's point of like, why? Why was it devastating? Right? Why was it hard for you? And we need to understand that that was like a massive deal for you. It wasn't just like, oh, I get everything that I wanted. And then all of a sudden they didn't put bacon on my sandwich. So I got irritated, right? Like we don't want not matching to be that level of annoyance. I want to feel how that rejection disrupted your life, right? And those of you who are reapplicants, it is a massive skill. It deserves to be rewarded. It deserves to be celebrated that you went from like an extremely low point in your life, probably, right? When you got that email that wasn't what you wanted, right? To then having to process that and then make a decision to keep going, right? And not just like, oh, I guess I'll try again, but like, no, I'm going to own this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the risk again and put more effort into it and like double down on this because I really believe in it. So if you're going to use being a reapplicant as your like challenge or adversity, like I want to know, how did you process those negative emotions? I want to know like why was it such a big deal for you? How did you decide what you were going to do differently this time? Like, why was it important to you to succeed? Right? Those why questions. Okay. Other questions?
I'm just going to add on to that and say that, especially if you're reapplying to a program that you applied to in the past, it is not a secret. They know that you're reapplying. So this is low-hanging fruit challenge that you can talk about. I mean, low-hanging fruit is like it's easily accessible in your mind to think of it, this particular challenge. And then followed by everything Michaela just said when you talk about it.
We also had another question here. Like, is it a good idea to talk about something that like the interviewer has done in the past that interests you? Like, if you research the people that were gonna interview you and you're interested in something that they've done. I think that's fine. I think it's less creepy if you're if you like say at the beginning, I was just looking into all the people that I was going to be meeting with, and I saw that you have done this. And that was really interesting to me because XYZ. Could I ask you a question about that? Like, that would be totally fine. I think bringing it up out of nowhere, like asking something specifically about their past with any type of like preamble or like context would seem a little off to me. But Janelle, you've been in that room
Yeah,
on
so
that
it's
end.
I'm not to plug Sarah Lawrence, but Sarah Lawrence does have a couple of people in the genetics world or in the genetic counseling community who are very well known. Um, and it's considered very endearing if you kind of fangirl or fanboy out about it. Do it early, like Michaela says. I would say it early. Like, actually, I read, or I was listening to a podcast that you just gave, or I read an article that you just wrote, or I know that you wrote a book, and I'm so excited to talk to you because I read the book too. Um, do it right in the beginning. It also will kind of get out some of your jitters too, and like you can kind of like laugh about it.
It's a great way. It's a great way to develop
Mhm.
rapport. I mean, who doesn't not like being flattered? Like,
Right.
I don't know. Everybody kind of likes being flattered. So that's okay. Make sure it is genuine, right? So that is not the approach that you should have with every single person you interview with at every single school. Because some of those people you're
Right.
not going to be able to find much, and some of those people are going to be boring. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, right? Because some
Yeah.
people are boring.
Not everybody. Yeah.
I don't have a lot of publications, like, to be honest, about me. So if you went to look up something about me before I started GC Prep, you would see like nothing, right? So that is fine. You don't have to do that all the time. But if you genuinely are interested in something that one of your interviewers has done, totally fine to bring it up. Okay. Someone also asked, like, will you know like who's interviewing you or the structure of what that day will look like beforehand?
Wait, can
Probably.
I chime in? You generally you will find out if you don't know the week before, 7 days before your interview, if you still don't know, it's okay to just send an email
Email.
and just check. But most programs will tell you those details the very least 7 days before
Yeah.
your interview.
Yeah. So it might not, you might not have them all when you get the interview invite. And again, right now is super duper 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 early. So if you haven't
Early.
heard
Yeah.
anything from schools, that is completely normal. It's completely normal at this point, okay? Um, when you get an interview invite, you'll probably be asked to pick the day. You probably won't have more information than that at that time. But then at some point, when they get closer, maybe have filled that interview day on their end, then they should send you a schedule. You may or may not know all the individual people that are going to interview you. And if you don't, then you at least should look into who the program leadership is as posted on the website, right? Like the program director and assistant program director.
Yeah, I back to the okay, so there are some well-known people on the admissions, and so for a time we didn't tell the applicants who they were being interviewed by because we didn't want them to over prep. We just wanted them to have a conversation with whoever it was and not feel like um intimidated by that. But then once the virtual aspect came, then we decided it's fine. Everyone's just gonna know who they're interviewing with and they can do the research that they want. But so other programs might have a similar thing where they don't want to tell you who you're being interviewed by. And the reasoning behind that is typically because it's not that they don't want you to know, it's just they don't want you to come in with like too much information or have spent so much time researching who is interviewing you that you then like I don't know, it gets weird because now you've spent so much time doing that you're not really showing who you are and who you are your best self because the focus then becomes on the interviewer. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if you don't get told who your interviewer is, that's probably the reasoning behind it.
Yeah. So, and again, it's not like you have to dedicate hours and hours and hours and hours to research the people that are interviewing you. Okay. If you are really crunched on time, which a lot of you will be, because guess what? It's right in the middle of like finals week or like your midterms, and there is no such thing as a convenient time for interviews. Um, look up the program director at very minimum, assistant program director, but like do not stress looking up every
Yeah.
single person. That's probably not the most efficient use of your time. Okay.
Okay.
And to give you guys context, because there's a couple of people that have said that they were like freaking out that other people had been getting interview invites and they haven't yet. Most schools are not sending out interview invites yet. We start to see those trickle in. Usually it starts mid to late January, and then February, there's a lot of them that are going out, right? And interviews tend to start mid-February and go to mid-March, right? Some programs are like even interviewing in January, which is like crazy, but they're doing it. So sure. So every school's a little bit different. Everybody's got different deadlines. Everybody's got different interview invites. Schools might have different waves of interview invites. Okay. So if you weren't in the first wave, as per whatever that document is on the Reddit, that's okay. They might send out another one. Okay.
Mhm.
So again, whatever is happening with other people, hooray for them, right? You do you. You just need to focus on yourself. You're not in direct competition with any given person. Your goal is just to bring your best self to interviews. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Um, there's one last question. Oh, no, I think that's it.
No, Jillian, that's totally fine.
Yeah, if
I
a
was
school is your
mentioning it
top choice.
before with the question of should you even say that you're applying to other programs. So I'll just reiterate, yes, feel free to share that you're applying to other programs. All of us and all programs know that applicants are applying to many programs. And if that program that you're interviewing with just happens to be your favorite or your top choice, you can go ahead and tell them. It's totally okay and no problems doing that either. It's not, it won't hurt your chances to tell them. So yeah,
Yeah.
please feel free to do that.
Schools want to be wanted,
Yeah.
right? Just like people. So again, totally fine. Totally fine. Okay. Our emails, you can just reach us this support at gcprepllc.com. It comes right to me, right? So that um, go ahead and send anything, any questions, any emails right to me. And then if you're trying to reach someone else, I can direct you. All the other coaches kind of use personal emails. And so um, I don't give them out on these types of webinars, but I'm happy to connect people with coaches that they're like considering or they want to talk to before deciding to go with them or not. So it's not like secret. It's just I don't want their personal information to be like on YouTube, if that makes sense. So, but the support at gcprepllc.com comes right to me. Again, you're seeing pretty much the entire team here. So we're small, um, but we've helped more than 100 people at this point become genetic counselors over the last, I think we did 3 years. Okay. So we will end it there today. Thank you to everyone who stuck it out. You guys are troopers because we went for a long time. But let me know if you have any other questions and just know that we are rooting for you and here to help you with whatever you need. Okay. Take care, you guys. Have a good night.